chief of research here. He is a professor at Howard University.
Yeah, so those are the high points. I'm also the
Mhm.
editor-in-chief of the Journal of Negro Education, which was founded in 1932 at Howard University, continuously running. And yeah, I'm excited to talk with you. I've read some of your work and I really like your perspective. So I'm looking forward to not just interviewing, but hopefully learn a little bit about what you have going on too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, Chalk and change.
Mhm.
John, I hope that when you send me that bio, you include a link in there to chalk and change. We want to make sure that we're promoting.
It's great to read it and then see it. And I'm doing some work up at Teachers College now at Columbia, and multimodal is kind of the wave. And so I think the more ways we could present some of these things, the more people are going to catch on to it. So I
Yeah.
just want to let you know I appreciate it. You found that nearly half the chronically absent students returned to school after a single intervention.
Mhm.
Um, what does that tell you about the field and
And a lot of people who didn't do research, like the teachers and grassroots activists, and even the families themselves, has let us know that absenteeism is more than a behavioral issue. And I think the thing that the school gets wrong is that they handle it almost exclusively as a behavioral issue. And we don't need to sugarcoat, we don't need to be naive. Sometimes kids cut school because they find school boring. They would rather do something else, like smoke a little bit, hang out with friends, do any number of things. So that element does exist. But what our research finds is that's not the majority of them. And in a lot of I talk about the privilege gap. So when you have privilege, it's easy for you to understand the behavioral issue because when you eliminate all the other factors, that's really the only thing driving absenteeism in your own world. If you are a family of privilege, the primary reason why your kid isn't going to school is because your kid is doing something, um, uh, is engaging in misbehavior. But because they have run out of clean clothes. They have outgrown clothes and haven't been able to afford to buy new clothes. They can't afford their uniforms. They only have a few workable uniform sets, and one of them gets damaged from horseplay or whatever. Clothing ever being an issue. Because you have so many options. You have a washer and dryer right in your house. That's not a lot of us think is a luxury, but it is a luxury to some people. Um, uh, and we also found, on the clothing issue, gender conforming clothing was also an issue with those who identified something other than the gender that they were born with. Um, a number of different things, including housing insecurity, transportation issues. And so when we zero in on behavior, then we miss all of these other things. And all of these other things are the things that can be fixed with an intervention. These are things that, if the community got together, if the schools thought a little bit more creatively, if the schools had better relationships, these are things that could be addressed. So I think that's where that mismatch is.
Yeah, I hear you. We in my research, in speaking to students, not even my research, just my day to day as the assistant principal, I can tell you, one time I sat down with a student who was absent a lot, um, and he said basically, I mean, he was stuck, right?
Mhm,
So, we're actively looking for kind of ways to deal with that. Um,
mhm.
I think you also bring up, not sure if you're know the word,
Right.
um, and my opinion, and let me know if you feel the same, and they sort of brought this up yesterday at our chronic absenteeism summit, was we're kind of moving, so we have to figure out ways to.
True, and we wrote a blog about the excused versus unexcused, and how a lot of the reasons why children who come from more affluent families get excused are the reasons taken as excused more often than those who come from lower class, working class. One example of that is shadowing a professional parent at work. A lot of times that's being considered an excused absence. But a child who goes to a work site to earn some extra money for their family, a lot of times that doesn't get excused. Um, and so yeah, we do have to look at it that way. That may go into a chart. The chorter um, met the criteria for being chronically absent 2 times over her K through 12 career. She's in college now. One time was because she was participating in the school play. This was in middle school. And I remember being very anxious about the number of days that she was missing. Um, and so she was missing all of those days. And then she was missing these days because she was meeting the score criteria to go on these field trips. So between those two, she was chronically absent. But the school never told us that she was chronically absent. They 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 never treated that as it was some kind of a problem. She had to get surgery for it. She spent time in the hospital, spent time rehabilitating. School worked with us. We never got judged. Um, there was never any treatment of us as or any indication that our child would be vulnerable to being left behind because of that. It was all about um, we'll work with you. And so we could work with them if we wanted to, but I think we have a little bit of a disdain for them. They're messing up the system, and that this is within their control, and they're being just let's put the past in the past. Let's work with the issue at hand. Let's focus on the future and getting you where you need to be, not the absences, regardless of what the reasons were. Um, for some reason, it's hard for schools to get past that mental block, or that I should say that emotional block that helps them to treat a child who missed school for reasons that they're unclear of, but it could be to help take care of a sick grandmother. Um, we have a difficult time treating those students like we treat our student athletes, our students who have known chronic illnesses, our accidents, our families that can articulate their hmm,
We lost you at
all right, yeah, and I think that was near the
During that I really want to highlight. In New Jersey, take your child to work day as an excuse absence. It doesn't count toward about, what is in office on that particular day versus the
Mhm.
student that goes to work with their parent uh, on a job site to go make some money or something like
Mhm.
that. Again, obviously, if it was time over time, that would be an issue, but,
Right,
a one off or a two off, why should that count against them?
yeah,
And I think that kind of leads to, so in the white paper, you state, especially specifically, the crisis is not distributed equally. 58.2% in student with disabilities bear a vastly disproportionate burden. I,
true.
I mean, I thought it is in a lot of
Mhm.
ways too, because I think it gets left out. Like chronic absenteeism is a social justice issue. Yeah.
Yeah. hmm Yeah, absolutely is. Yeah. And when you if someone looks at chronic absenteeism as strictly a behavioral issue and they see those disparities, then what they're going to logically reason is that these children have behavior problems that exceed the other populations, and a lot of times that gets extended to other tropes and stereotypes like They have family disunity, or they're from single parent households, and all of those types of things. And so the lack of compassion that we have for those who have a more difficult time going to school is probably the biggest problem. We think the biggest problem is them just not coming, or like a willful disobedience on their behalf. But it really is our lack of understanding and our lack of compassion. I remember giving a talk on chronic absenteeism, a pretty large group that was in there. If any of them ever in their life had to rely on public transportation as their sole mode of transportation, none of them, you know. And so if you have children and families where public transportation is their sole mode of transportation, then you have this blind spot that you need to address. But I mean, I think that that would be a good exercise to do. If you can give up your car for a week. I'm not recommending that, but if you decide not to give up your car for a week, just kind of think about it. Just imagine your life with public transportation being your only mode of transportation, and talk to somebody where that is their primary mode of transportation. Talk about how much earlier they may have to get up, or how much more planning they have to do. Talk about the frequency in which there are no shows, or issues, mechanical issues, and things like that. And so when you go through these different things, and I already gave the clothing example, um, but if you could take an inventory of the things that we know may be experiences of those students who are in low income homes, and dealing with other issues related to that. And then just, talk about it, learn about it, imagine your life that way. Then maybe we could develop a little bit more of empathetic approaches to dealing with this issue, because the callous approaches, they clearly don't work, and it could further marginalize students, push them to the fringes of the school system, when we should be trying to bring them in.
Yeah, I assume you may have already answered this, but your paper found that about 50% of districts, even though they had the data right in front of them, were
Mhm.
resistant to these methods. Do you find that was similar with something else involved?
Yeah, so we really need to do a deep dive into why districts may be a little refractory to change. Um, One of the advantages that we've had with looking at, we have a lot of enterprises that have gotten these statistics for us, and so we can get statistics, homes, and then talk to them and be able to pair that quantitative data with the qualitative data. We do know that there's a lot of inaction on the part of the districts. We know that suspension have worked against our best efforts in a lot of different ways. But in terms of really going in and talking to administrators that make these kinds of decisions, and really getting a chance to know um, whether their response to behaviors is because of a lack of empathy, or is because of something else, um, I can I could talk about that through anecdote, and through limited experiences. But we haven't gotten the types of qualitative voices from administrators that could help us to say with certainty whether lack of empathy undergirds all of their practices. Um, but we do see clearly through how they are dealing with these different situations that empathetic type of responses does not seem to be permeating the system in a way that will make the kind of impact that our research implies that it would. So that's something that we really need to further investigate.
Pages a little bit. Um, the white a white paper argues that data and technology should be in service of human connection, not a replacement for it.
Right.
Where do you see districts getting that balance wrong right now?
Yeah, I think that a lot of districts layer technology on type of and let's talk about relationships. If a child has a strong relationship with the school, and a family has a strong relationship with the school, and if you ask them basic questions like, do you think the school has your best interests? Um, do you think it is a school a place that you can count on when you need extra help or you need support? Um, so relationships is something that can't be built by technology. It can be facilitated with technology, but technology can't replace relationships. So when you use something like robocalls, automatic trigger alerts when a child misses school, if you haven't built the relationship, then that robocall can seem hostile because it's it's a good relationship. That robocall will be seen as a friendly reminder because the sender is a friendly sender. And so, that's an example of, we need to work on human connections first and then use technology to facilitate that. And, technology has really opened up a, a, a wide world for us to really think creatively and innovatively about how we resolve a lot of things that have been very difficult for us to achieve in schools, like exposing students to people outside of their community. Um, Without technology, uh, the world was very insular, and we weren't able um, to have them talk to people from different professions, people from different cultures, um, uh, uh, famous people, people that they may be fans of. Logistically, it would be very difficult to have those people travel in or to get the students to travel to those individuals. But now technology, just like I'm at a conference in Atlanta right now, I could still have this conversation with you. Um, we could do for students what we haven't been able to do, which is connect them to the world in much more meaningful ways. But very few schools are thinking like that because they haven't bought into the idea that these connections are important. So instead, since they've been trained on things like standardized tests, they'll build major industries around improving students' performance on standardized tests. Um, because, absenteeism is something that's important, and it is, but we'll see some lack of innovation when it comes to dealing with absenteeism is dealing with it on by warning them, giving them a warning, which is consistent with the assumption that it's a behavioral issue, as opposed to doing something more supportive or using that technology to connect them to deeper systems or using the technology to help with resource allocation and pooling of resources. So how we use technology is a function of our what we think the problem is, our perspective on the problem is, and it's also a function on how we feel about the people that we're using technology to reach.
I'll tell you, nothing angers people at my job more than the robocall.
Oh yeah.
We can't get them in for like it was misplaced.
Mm,
That call is coming
mm,
and I agree. Right,
mm,
and not on the phone. It is a text message. It's a DM. It's adults helping them solve problems. So I think facilitation is the perfect way to put it. And that's what we
mm.
found through our study. Um, I think we would be remiss if we didn't kind of talk about the downside of it a little bit, right? So the immediate gratification of gaming, um, the you have to up it, and we're alluding to.
Yeah, yeah. So, and we didn't do a deep dive into this with this particular paper or study. What you read is it's about. But just to add on to it, um, I think that we are at a critical inflection point when it comes to technology. And I do think that we've learned a lot about the downsides of technology. I know with my own children, my oldest daughter, she got a cell phone a lot earlier than my son, and that's because we didn't know when she was younger, withholding those devices, and they also both went to the same middle school. Their phones to school. When my daughter was in middle school, I know from her that they were using it for all types of things that they should never be using their phones for in school. But now that same school, years later, when my son goes there, they have to put their phones in a locker, sign it in when they get to school, and then they could pick it up on the way out. And that goes for any devices, even the watch. So I think that a lot of the children that got early access to it, we didn't know what we didn't know. But now we need to do better, and when we do need to look at all of those hazards that you mentioned that I talked about in the report. We have to look at all of those hazards and make sure that we really understand them and have a shared understanding of ways in which it can be harmful. In middle school, I do agree with the policy, a no cell phone policy, but I know that that's not uniform across all schools. At least discuss whether or not there should be uniform no phone policies, especially in lower grades. I think that's something that we need to think about.
Work, or your recent paper. For me, I'm kind of a data nerd, Excel spreadsheet way, but in
Yeah.
the tell me what's going on, through
Mhm.
autism is a discipline problem, right? We talked a little bit about that and it be a lack of empathy.
Across districts, uh, if we have shared goals of making sure students are learning, we are preparing them for life beyond school, then it's in all of our best interests to create the type of environment that is going to facilitate that growth. These qualitative sources not having a disservice to the students, and particularly those who secondary success, and who can start businesses that helps to grow our. We want it to be safer for meaningfully and completely. Benchmarks, but beyond just meeting the benchmarks, is districts who can produce students who will become leaders, who will more than that. It's about improving lives, not changing numbers.
There's a ton of costs, right? And I
Mhm.
think today's America, there's a little bit of a, if we're thinking of it from the district level, there's a school population, right? And I think a lot of that comes down to um, how is my money being spent, right, as a
Mhm.
taxpayer. So I just want to highlight these two things from your paper. Um, each chronically absent student costs about 56 Chris numbers.
Yeah.
Um, so
Right.
I think when you know I I think we often hear not my child, not my problem.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and I think it's also and I can't remember off my head where this comes from, but there is a statistic out there that a student in class with a chronically absent student will receive when I speak because it's not often thought about. Um,
Right.
do you want to talk about that, Sharon?
Yeah, so and thank you for highlighting those figures. That's exactly what I was talking about. That's the hard numbers behind it. Um, but you know, that's a very important observation in terms of children who aren't at school, or when a child isn't at school, it doesn't just hurt that child, but it hurts the ones who are at school. Um, there's another study that was done that looked at students' perception of their teachers, where there was less um, overall problems with things like chronic absenteeism. And I think it's because if a teacher has that's losing students are that can't control the environment, they tend to treat all children a little bit differently, and a lot of times they don't feel as good about their own job. It reduces their efficacy. Not just single parts. You know, it's a the sum total is greater than the sum of the parts when it comes to chronic absenteeism. So, fixing this issue will help with a lot of other issues that we may not see as directly.
A little bit, and you did mention some of this, but talk about why kids miss school, why we're chronically absent. We had got into it in the beginning.
Mhm.
Um, I think it's important to highlight, your report is based off 17,000 home visits.
Yes.
That's a
Hmm.
big N
Right.
in research terms, right?
Hmm.
Should we be correcting? And granted, all of them, right? All
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
clauses, and there is a bit of intractability and
Hmm.
systemic things in it.
Right.
But like, what are you really seeing outside
Yeah.
of just what's in the paper?
Yeah, and the 17,000 is a collective of districts all across the nation. We've done similar analyses with one district, and a lot of times we'll see similar patterns across districts. Um, Typically, we'll land in the top 1 to 3 slot. Um, and, we all understand the relationship between good health and regular attendance at school, or poor health and missing school. Like we understand that gray areas, some ambiguity, and I think with COVID-19, that if you have minor symptoms, stay home, or everybody stay home. To CDC recommending different things now. So more and then we saw a lot of these more rare disorders, but collectively, all of these different rare issues have a major impact. So I do think it's worth it to schools to talk about the relationship and really going over their attendance policies when it comes to, what's excused and what's not excused. We all know about the doctor's excuse. If you get a doctor's excuse, you'll probably have an excused absence, but not every health. And you have some people with a doctor in their neighborhood. They could literally go down the street and get a doctor's note from one of their neighbors who may have seen their child for a second. And so we can't limit it to doctors' excuses, and that's a conversation that they have the comfort level of students and families coming to school with even minor conditions because there's a lot of variance with that. And I think the
Well,
most complicated issue, and this is where this is a health challenge that um, is probably going to be a lot of disagreement, and and the schools need to really wrestle with this. But this is when students are taking care of other sick family members. Do we excuse it? Don't we excuse it? What's our policy on that? And how do we treat students who say, our families that say that youngest child is sick? If the elementary school child is sick, then the high school kid has to stay home because the mother has to work. And so these are things that we see come up over and over and over. But it seems like the schools only deal with that on a very surface level. But the details that it invites a conversations that I just don't see us having right now. Um, I can go as deeply into transportation, but I think, with the things I said about health, think about that kind of nuance when it comes to transportation, particularly those relying on public transportation. So I do think, those major buckets that's in the report. I think it's worth it for schools to take that and then think about their own school population, think about the conversations they have, think about their policies and match their policies to what we are talking here. Make sure there's a shared understanding of these policies. But beyond the policies and practices, the communication, how do we talk about this with families? How do we advise families? How do we support families on these issues that we see keep popping up in district after district?
Yeah, so a couple of things I want to go off of there. You brought up health, number one.
Hmm.
Um, I think, you said it without saying it. Part of it goes back to that inequality social justice issue,
Yeah.
right? Because
Hmm.
we're talking about getting a note versus not getting a note. Sometimes that's a matter of having insurance.
Yeah, mental health is also included in that.
So,
Definitely.
so for me, that's what scares me when I talk
Hmm.
about chronic absenteeism. And I
Yeah.
think I think we've kind of evened out. We're only going down 0.5%, 1% a year now, where there were some decent gains after coming transport, like it's not mental health, right?
Hmm.
It's such a issue that
Yeah.
it doesn't allow for that one first childhood experience and trauma informed. That's a real problem.
Hmm.
And it's a real problem as we see more um, go the other way, right?
Yeah.
When are we going to
Hmm.
allow a child to take a sick day to take care of another child? Or
Yeah.
book possibility and statistics, how to
Yeah.
use data to eliminate pay.
Yeah. So then this is the book, hot off the press. It's only been out for um, less than a month now. So I've been doing a lot of book signings, um, but it's a mixed method approach, and it talks about something called the context coefficient, which is I think what we've talked about a lot during this call. And the context coefficient is the things that we see outside really see. Those are things that may influence the score. That's not seen, and the more error, the less reliable or valid that actual number is. What I talk about in the book is not really error, it's context. If we give a reading test to a school that doesn't have air conditioning, and the test is in May or an unseasonably hot May, uh, we would typically call that error if it affects their score on reading with more than just their score. It helps us to see a larger environment that they're in, and it helps us to understand their experiences better. And that's what we need to do with our attendance data. We need to understand the context of it. We need to be able to use multiple methods to really understand what's going on a deeper level. We uh, also need to humanize it more. I call possibly in statistics the love language of scientific discovery. You really want to investigate um, how to make that issue better and not just investigate it for the sake of investigating it. And it also helps us to move away from this cold and callous approach that we typically treat numbers when we use so-called objective research, and really subjectively connect to the research that we're doing, so that we could not just understand the nature of the problem the from the posture of a detached scientist, but to really understand it from the position of someone who cares and is invested in the issue and deeply wants to see changes happen for the betterment of the people that we're investigating, next to the work that I'm doing for Concentric on chronic absenteeism.
The graphic novel illustrations. Do we get some of those in the book, or how are we representing statistics in the book?
We don't have the graphic novel illustrations in the book. Unlike Stephen, the publishing company was a little bit more rigid. I wasn't able to stand the value of visuals, so I do have a look at our data and findings artistically, have an artistic lens to it, is also a strategy to finding more possibility in our statistics and not just rigidly focused on probability.
May not be as in depth in the research as us.
That can, if we fixate on it too much, it can distract us from looking at the deeper issues around that. Different districts deal with that metric in different ways. As with a lot of attendance data that we have, separated from the lived experiences of the ones who illustrates or it applies to average daily attendance.
I love the home visits. My professional student advocates.
Yeah, well, visits I analyze, that's a reflection of what they're saying is happening. Um, I do believe in the power of the home visit. I can remember the few times when a professional came to my house when I was a child. I remember and really, I think only one time a professional came to my house, and that was an Army recruiter. And I still remember how they looked. I remember the interactions I had with them. Um, but it was to where I live. Um, and with my own students, I can remember the few times a teacher actually came to our home. One of the times was during COVID-19. So I think that there's a message that um, someone receives when someone comes to their house, not because they're in trouble, but because they care about them. Um, it's a message that can go a long way. So leveraging home visits to increase empathy and to improve relationships is a strategy that
Something really powerful about when you think if you want to talk about that quickly, and then just maybe a final take or final giveaway of how in your view a school should go about you know
course. Yeah, so the care framework we developed, what do PSAs have to say? Um, that was their opportunity to really talk about their experiences. And so we did a thematic analysis of that and came up with those are saying that um, their job works for students. In terms of what's the first thing that student that schools should do, I'll go back to something I said earlier. You can use the report, look at some of those major findings in terms of why students aren't coming to school. Um, think about your own school setting, talk to your teachers and talk to the counselors, talk to the families, see in what ways you can relate to that, and then have those deep conversations, those conversations I talked about earlier in terms of really getting into the weeds of health challenges, mental health, and physical health, really getting into the weeds of transportation. I think having these deep conversations, reviewing your policies, making sure that there's not a mismatch of policies and the realities of the students that you have. I think that would be the first thing that someone should do.
so, I think we talked prior to officially coming on here, and
Yeah.
it's
Great place to end the conversation. John,
Okay.
thank you so much.
you're
Yeah,
Ivory,
welcome.
thank
thank
you
you so
guys.
much.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
listening
I've got a
in
chance to talk to you.
has been a treat. And Ivory, I got some thought leading discussed it a while back, but operational question here. When do you think the first piece with this interview in it will appear on your Substack?
Yeah, so my goal, actually, you know what, I want to send that past you. So I'm going to get this transcript. I want to give you the opportunity to review it, make sure everything was reflective of the things you actually wanted to get across. And I'll
Perfect.
obviously tag you guys on those things.
Perfect. That's great. Our preferred platforms. There you go.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, John. Have a great day.
Okay.
Take care, guys.
Bye bye now.